Jewry. In the outside world, the welfare of Jews depends on the maintenance of secular, non-racial, pluralistic societies. In Israel, Jewry defines itself defending a society in which mixed marriages cannot be legalized, in which non-Jews have a lesser status than Jews, and in which the ideal is racial and exclusionist, end of quote. The right of the Palestinian people to enjoy equal rights is not negotiable or relative. It is the sine qua non of a just and durable peace in Palestine and the region. As Edward Said once summed up the question of Palestine in a private conversation with me, it's equality or nothing. Anyone who claims to support Palestinian rights while calling only for ending the 46-year-old Israeli occupation of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, is actually upholding most of the rights of only 38% of the Palestinian people, those living in the occupied territories. According to the 2013 statistics, of the 11.8 million Palestinians, 50% live in exile, denied their UN-sanctioned right to return to their homes of origin, and 12% are Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel, living under a system of what the US State Department calls, quote, institutional, legal, and societal discrimination, end of quote. Freedom, justice, and equality, the main slogans and objectives of the BDS movement, are not only rooted in a rich heritage of Palestinian popular and civic resistance, they're also inspired by the enduring legacy of Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr., who creatively, persistently, and with piercing vision coupled peace with justice, and both with the irreducible right to equality. If boycott, at the most fundamental level, constitutes withdrawing cooperation from an evil system or policy, as Martin Luther King defined it once, BDS fundamentally is calling upon people of conscience and their institutions to fulfill their profound moral obligation to desist from complicity in Israel's system of oppression. Ending complicity in crime is hardly heroic. Given the billions of dollars lavished by the US on Israel every year, US taxpayers are in effect, and irrespective of their will, subsidizing Israel's violations of international law at a time when their own social, educational, health, housing, and other services are undergoing taxing cuts. I don't need to tell you that at this university. Striving to end US complicity in Israel's oppression becomes not only good for the Palestinians, but also for the 99% in the US, as it were, who are struggling for social and economic justice and for a dignified living. Building on its global ascendance, the BDS movement has spread across many US campuses, churches, community centers, LGBTQ organizations, scoring important victories and increasingly winning hearts and minds, including among many Jewish activists and groups. BDS has entered the US mainstream to the extent that President Barack Obama found it necessary to attack it in his address to AIPAC's annual conference on March 4, 2012, thus joining a large chorus of US politicians whose vehement vilification of BDS has put them on a moral plane with those white Americans who pushed back against the Montgomery bus boycott, and with those who long held the line against the boycott and divestment in the South African apartheid case. With its many advances in the economic, cultural, and academic boycott fields, BDS, which is led by the largest coalition in Palestinian civil society, the BDS National Committee, or BNC, is viewed today by Israeli officials as, quote, a strategic threat to Israel's regime of oppression. With its continued siege of Gaza, its untamed construction of illegal colonies in the West Bank, especially in and around Jerusalem, its, quote, strategy of Judaization, as it's called officially, manifested in forcible displacement of Palestinian communities in Jerusalem, the Galilee, the Jordan Valley, and the Naqab or Negev, its adoption of a battery of racist laws, and its unbending denial of the UN-stipulated right of return for Palestinian refugees, Israel has embarked on an entirely more belligerent and violent phase in its attempt to extinguish the question of Palestine through literally disappearing the Palestinians, as Edward Said would say. Israel and its well-oiled lobby groups, which Thomas Friedman accuses of buying and paying for allegiance in Congress, have been trying to delegitimize the Palestinian quest for equal rights under international law by portraying the quintessentially nonviolent BDS call for equal rights and the right of return as aiming to destroy Israel. If equality and justice would destroy Israel, one cannot but ask, what does that say about Israel? Did equality and justice destroy South Africa? Did they destroy Alabama? Of course not. Justice and equality only destroy their negation, injustice and inequality. BDS advocates equal rights for all humans and categorically opposes all forms of racism, including Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, as well as racism against blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, and others. The impressive growth of BDS in recent years has been met with panic, slander, and over-the-top bullying, as witnessed most recently with the unprecedented vilification against the American Studies Association, the Modern Language Association, and other entities that have criticized Israeli policies or called for an economic boycott of Israeli institutions in solidarity with the Palestinian people, scholars included. To understand why the ASA boycott has attracted considerably more than its fair share of attacks from the Israeli establishment and the lobby groups, one must examine the wider context, the trend of BDS growth worldwide. The BDS movement set an impressive number of precedents in 2013, which seems to be carrying through to 2014. A few days ago, the giant $200 billion Dutch Pension Management Fund, PGGM, divested from all Israeli banks because of their illegal involvement in the occupied territories. Trade union federations with millions of members in Brazil, South Africa, Britain, Ireland, and elsewhere have endorsed BDS. Some corporations that are complicit in Israel's occupation and violation of international law, such as Veolia, Alstom, and G4S, have paid a heavier than expected price in the form of continuous loss of lucrative contracts worth, in some cases, billions of dollars. On the academic BDS front, in a letter of support to the ASA, the University of Hawaii Ethnic Studies Department became the first academic department in the US to support the academic boycott of Israel. In April 2013, the Association for Asian American Studies endorsed the academic boycott, the first professional academic association in the US to do so. Around the same time, the Teachers Union of Ireland unanimously called on its members to cease all cultural and academic collaboration with the, quote, apartheid state of Israel. And the Federation of French-speaking Belgian students, representing 100,000 members, adopted a freeze of all academic partnerships with Israeli academic institutions. Student councils at several North American universities, including the widely reported success at the University of California, Berkeley, adopted divestment from companies, US companies, profiting from Israel's occupation. We hope you're next. Also in 2013, Stephen Hawking, the world's leading scientist, boycotted an Israeli conference led by Shimon Peres. It's worth mentioning that in March 2011, the University of Johannesburg in South Africa voted to sever links with Ben Gurion University in Israel over the latter's collusion in human rights violations. Many world-renowned artists, music bands, have in the last few years cancelled scheduled performances in Israel or refused to play Israel to start with. Multi-million-dollar campaigns waged by the Israeli Foreign Ministry to rebrand Israel through art, science, and the cynical use of LGBT rights to whitewash or pinkwash Israel's denial of basic rights to all Palestinians have largely failed to cover up Israel's daily injustices. In June 2013, as an indicator of that failure, the Israeli government shifted overall responsibility for fighting the BDS movement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Whether or not BDS is reaching a tipping point, it is hard to deny that recent BDS developments have led to an explosion of interest in scrutinizing and criticizing aspects of Israel's regime of oppression. they've also provided a critically needed free space for debating Israel's denial of Palestinian rights and for connecting the struggle for Palestinian rights with struggles here at home in the United States against war, racism, environmental destruction, right-wing immigrant policies, and economic injustice. Calling for a boycott of Israel and its complicit institutions is still quite controversial in the United States and may still cause its untenured advocate an unexpected career end, but it is no longer taboo. In conclusion, the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire reminds us that, quote, dehumanization, which marks not only those whose humanity has been stolen, but also, though in a different way, those who have stolen it, is a distortion of the vocation of becoming more fully human. The struggle for humanization is possible only because dehumanization, although a concrete historical fact, is not a given destiny, but the result of an unjust order that engenders violence in the oppressors, which in turn dehumanizes the oppressed. He continues, in order for the struggle to have meaning, the oppressed must not, in seeking to regain their humanity, become in turn oppressors of the oppressors, but rather restorers of the humanity of both, end of quote. Striving to do just that, the BDS movement has consistently rejected the notion of revenge and opted for justice instead. It does not regard the attainment of Palestinian rights as a negation of anyone else's rights, but as a basic fulfillment of the right to have rights, and simultaneously as a magnanimous offer to the oppressors to regain their humanity by ceasing to be oppressors. A movement that dwells in citizen consciences, that is rooted in an oppressed people's heritage of struggle for justice, that is based on equal humanity and inspired by the rich and diverse legacies of Mandela and King, cannot be defeated or co-opted. Our South Africa moment has arrived. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar, very much. Omar Barghouti has agreed to keep his talk quite short, so there will be plenty of time for discussion, questions, comments. I believe that there are microphones circulating. Is that correct? Yes. We're going to take 3 questions at a time, and Omar will respond to them together, and then we'll take the further 3 questions. So if you have questions, please come to the microphone or ask for the microphone, and then we'll be going to you. Thank you. Can we turn the stage lights down a little bit so the audience is visible? Can we get the microphone?
It's on. There's so much I'm over here. I'll stand. Sir, there was a great deal in your presentation that one could take issue with. As a matter of fact, almost all of it, but I'd like to just start at the beginning. When you talk about relative humanization, which is a very nice sounding term, you gave 3 examples. And you said, first of all, that all or most Israelis support occupation. Secondly, you said that birth and death at Israeli checkpoints, and so on, the behavior, you alluded to the behavior of soldiers. And the third thing, you talk about children being targeted by Israeli sharpshooters. I'd like to know how you can justify the statement, first of all, that almost all Israelis support occupation when that happens not to be so. Secondly, I'd like to know if Israel is the only country where soldiers have behaved in opposition to the rules of their officers, etc., etc. I think that we have examples of that in other countries, including the United States of America. That does not in any way say that there is a legitimacy to that. It's an unfortunate byproduct of conflict, and I think that conflict just really gets exacerbated by statements such as you have made. And third, children being targeted by Israeli sharpshooters into throwing rocks and being murdered for sport. Sir, I'd like you to justify that. That is an absolutely outrageous, absurd, disgusting kind of a statement. And it says nothing, by the way, excuse me, it says nothing, by the way, of Israelis who have been victimized by Palestinians in discos and at Passover Seder's, etc., by suicide bombers. So I'd like to know how you would justify your outrageous remarks to begin.
I'm sorry, just a quick comment. We do want everybody to be able to speak, and we do have limited time in the room. So please keep your questions and comments down to 2 minutes at a maximum. Thank you. We'll take a speaker from this side, and then from that side if there is one.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Gary Faust. I'm an adjunct teacher at UC Irvine Extension. And I think the main question that I would have is kind of more to the Department of Humanities and the Ethnic Studies Department, who's sponsoring Mr. Barghouti here today, and ask you, are you putting your imprimatur and your seal of approval on his opinions his one-sided opinions about a very complicated conflict? Because you bring a man here who has gotten his higher education in Israel at Tel Aviv University, who is not an Israeli, and yet who now goes around the world advocating an academic, economic, and cultural boycott of Israel, which is kind of the definition of a hypocrite in the English language. So my question to you is this a position, since two of your professors are co-founders of the U.S. campaign for an academic boycott of Israel, and about 10 of your professors here at UC Irvine, or Riverside, have signed the ASA resolution to boycott Israel. Is this your official opinion here? And do you plan, for the benefit of these students, to bring in anybody to speak on behalf of Israel so the students can get two sides of the issue or just one? Because it seems to me that this is not education in progress, this is indoctrination. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Irene Morrison, and I'm a student here at UCR. And first of all, I did a great summary of the student careers, so thank you. Secondly, I'm sorry, I'm so upset by the last two speakers that I'm trying to calm down. We received on our way in here a very misleading quote by Martin Luther King about supporting Israel, and it seems very misleading, so I was wondering if you could address the kind of war. It's very typical it's like the American tradition to misattribute Martin Luther King. So I was just wondering if you could address that happening here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I do invite other people to come up and ask questions while Barghouti is responding.
Okay, I'll answer the first three questions in order. The first question had three parts. The questioner claimed that I said that all Israelis are in support of the occupation. I made no such remarks.
Yes, you did, right?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. What I said is supporting specific policies, not all Israelis supporting the occupation. There's no proof of that, and I never mentioned that in my paper. My paper is printed. It wasn't an ad-lib comment, so you're misquoting me. The second point, but of course a great majority of Israelis support violation of Palestinian rights. That's obvious. Violating the Palestinian right of return is almost unanimous among Jewish Israelis. Over 90% support that. The massacre in Gaza in 2008-2009 was supported by about 94% of Jewish Israelis. So there's a large majority in Israel supporting violations of Palestinian rights. The second question was, is Israel the only country violating international law, its soldiers committing crimes, not following the rules of combat, and so on? How about the US? what you said is unfortunate violations occur.